Hello, everybody, and welcome to another wonderful episode of Can We Just Talk? I'm here with the fine couples, and we're looking forward to enjoying a beautiful session talking about Black love and the happily ever after. So before we get into this, let's open with a word of prayer.
Dear Father in heaven, thank you for your constant guidance. Thank you for allowing us all to be here today. We are delving into a topic that's in the forefront of a lot of people's mind. Helping us to be able to get through it, to get knowledge from each other, but also to teach something as well today, Lord, and for people to understand how He works within our families. Bless us, protect us in your holy precious name, I pray. Amen.
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 Amen. So Black empowerment. I mean, clearly from this we can see that we've got some beautiful couples, praise the Lord.
Amen.
For the blessing. But we've got some beautiful Black people around us as well, people who have raised us, people who have inspired us. So what is Black empowerment? What is that? Has anyone got any ideas or can share? Like what is Black empowerment? How would you put that into a word, if it's possible?
I think it's one of those things where we're encouraged to excel in anything that we do, to be the best at what you do. So anything you put your mind to, you want to be the best at it. Even if you're not the best at it, it's the fact that you tried your hardest. That's all anyone can ask for.
Yeah, I think it's about being comfortable in who you are. And I think that's the main thing, not striving to be something that fits in with what society will demand of you or what society would expect. It's just, this is me, this is my culture, this is my value system, being strong in that and being understanding of how it impacts other people as well.
I see it as also building upon that. I see it as being proud of your heritage, being proud of who you are, where you come from, being proud of your roots, your ethnicity, and all of the above that make you who you are as a person, and not throwing away your culture.
Yeah,
That's like, you guys have all like nailed exactly what I was thinking, in sense of like you really have to know where you come from, because I know a lot of Black people, their history goes back for them just as far as slavery. So it's understanding there was a before slavery, there was an after, where we also showed that we excelled as well. So it's just understanding where you come from and just understanding who you are and being confident in your possibilities as well. The world's your oyster.
Yeah, I think that's the key thing there.
Yeah, I was going to say, so I mean, adding on to that then, how do we, as we're all Black parents, we're all young Black parents. So how do we as Black parents in society, in the world that we live in, how do we work hard? How do we graft to ensure that our children have equal opportunities?
Go on, Dre.
Look, I was saying, I think there's two elements to this, right? And it's almost going back to what Jonathan was just saying before on Micah, we're talking about being proud of our heritage. I know for me personally, that when my parents came to England, like I don't know much about Jamaica. I don't know much about where I came from. So my background, my history, my culture pretty much started from Britain onwards. It's all I know. So the culture here is all I know. And so for me, the grafting is the career side of it, but also I think you have to graft to be able to help your children understand where they come from, to be able to provide them some sort of cultural understanding that they may be different, but it's nothing to be ashamed of. So I think you've got to graft for their social side. And also, I was always told, whether for right or wrong, that I had to work twice as hard to be seen as half as good.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I remember as a kid, I would be woken up before school for tutoring, then go to school, come home, have tutoring, because and all these different things, purely because like my dad was kind of just like, any hole that they can find with you, they will find with you. Don't give anybody any opportunity. And so I was speaking with some colleagues at work, Like no matter whether you're good or whether you're bad, in terms of your ability or skill set, the one thing I've learned is I can work, I can graft.
That's it.
Yeah.
I think, you know, Dean, were you going to say something?
So,
Me?
No, Stacey.
Oh, go on, Stacey.
You carry on.
No, you first, go on.
I was just going to say that we're not that bad with our kids. They don't get up before school, etc., etc. However,
there's still time.
Well, yeah. But I was told the same message as well. It was very much, you need to work hard to get to where you want to be. And I do still have that mentality when it comes to our kids. I do try and push them, should I say, especially because, you know, you hear a lot about the underachievement, shall we say, of Black kids in school, and often they're perhaps maybe not given the attention, or just because it's not expected of them, they're not pushed harder. And so I find myself pushing Aliyah in particular at home, because, and I tell her all the time as well, when she's like, oh, I can't do it, it's too hard, I say, no, you can do it, you're more than capable.
That's
and just
it.
really encouraging her to strive and be the best that she can be.
And I think this, sorry babe, do you want to go first?
No.
I was going to say that I think the sad matter of fact is, even though we're supposed to live in a society where ideally everything is equal, we have to give our kids that encouragement and that confidence to push on even when there's barriers in their way, because the pressure is still there. The minute you as a Black ethnicity person fails, it's almost like it's expected. When you succeed, it's wow, we did not see that coming, we didn't expect that to come. But if you fail, trust me, people won't turn a blind eye and think that that's expected. So if you don't encourage your kids to push past that failure, they could very much fall back into, you know, the statistic and just be one. You have to encourage them not to be a statistic.
I'm building upon that.
Oh, sorry. Go on.
Go on.
I was going to say, it's the same, following on from what Winnie's saying, I think it's important to say that, you know, it's important for your children to see that you struggle as well, to see that the struggle is actually real, and, you know, and how you overcome those barriers, because, you know, when we are their role models, when they're watching us and they're seeing how we deal with things, if we just give up and we say, look, you know, this is just how life is for us, and we just kind of deal with it, I think that then gets passed on through generations. And I believe, I'm sure all of you believe the same thing as well. We have to change this. It has to change. So they need to see us overcoming those barriers so that they know how to deal with it too.
And that's really important. I mean, this is why, you know, Jonathan, you know, your mum and dad made a sacrifice. My mum made a sacrifice, and they sent us to a private school, a boarding school, because they wanted us to do well. They wanted us to achieve. I see you laughing, Dre. Dre, you
how did that work out, guys?
There, Dre.
How did it work out, guys?
But you know, the reality of it is, at the time, I didn't appreciate it. But when I went back to Stanborough and did chaplaincy in 2010, I went to the bursar's office, and he pulled up my file, and I saw the amount of money, Jonathan, the amount of money that our parents paid for fees. And I just had to ring my mum and say, thank you. You know, I love you. I am so grateful for the sacrifice you made, because I never appreciated it. And building upon this now, like some of you guys have said, I really
want a bit of DPA.
Pardon?
Isn't that a bit of DPA going on there? Data protection.
There you go.
Listen, man, it's all good. But listen, like seriously, it's like when I think about it and stuff, and I think about the sacrifice our parents made, I have to say thank you. And then when I look at my children, I want them to have the same experiences, if not better. Now, I wouldn't send them to a boarding school, but I want them to at least understand that they are valuable and can do well as biracial children. It's important.
Yeah. Same, I think. A big thing for us, like Mike was talking about, was you have to instill that graft in your children as well. Like my parents, I remember having, you know, you get the speak and spell, I had a little green computer, and it was like, you know, push to try and get the higher levels, and keep pushing and keep pushing. Yeah, trust me, they were the ones, man. And like my mom and dad would keep, you know, encouraging me to keep going through the programs, and they'd buy the little stylus pen I could practice my maths with. There was, you know, the abacus, and we practiced using the abacus. Nah, for real.
How old are you, fam?
Nah, for real.
Yo, Jay, you're counting buttons.
There is a whole load of people going, an abacus.
What's an abacus?
Yeah, abacus from a teacher. Abacus
for real?
is the way forward. Okay, abacus is brilliant. You know, it's hands-on. They can count. It's colourful. Get an abacus, please, guys.
Oh, Dion had to back you there, Jonathan.
So I bought one for Caleb, and as you guys probably know, I've been struggling with Caleb in his maths. But I drew for the abacus, and we started going through 2 times tables, and he was getting it. Bang, bang. And I was like, nah, come on, son.
Really?
Jonathan,
face.
Jonathan, please, can we please remind everybody of how old Caleb is? And you're complaining about 2 times tables.
Yeah, now we're getting there. It's 4. But that's the thing, like.
This is exactly the like he's pushing you, and clearly capable. So it's just showing like you can do it, and it's positive affirmations as well. So when he has his moments where he's like, "Oh, mummy, I just can't," I'm like, "Caleb," and he's like, "I can do it," and I'm like, "See,
yeah."
And that's like frustrating him because it's like he's very much a rush child and quick, and you know it's very hard to get him to slow down, which in turn causes errors. And then you know I'll just make up a random song just to kind of pace him and get him to do things a bit slower, and he'll be like, "Mummy, sing the song for me." And it's just having those like positive reinforcements and just really encouraging our children instead of getting, you know, frustrated and saying, "Okay, forget it then," or whatever. Maybe it's about coming back to something and saying, you know, you can do it. You are capable. You are brilliant. You are great. We had a really good activity from Sabbath School last week where the children had to do a picture of themselves and just talk about some things they liked about themselves. And I said to Caleb, "What do you like about yourself?" And he was like, "I don't know." So I started off just by making it a bit fun. I was like, "Are you super fast? Have you got super speed?" Because you know he's super fast and runs around the garden doing
Flash Gordon.
Yeah. So I was like, "Are you super speed?" And he's like, "Yeah, mummy." I was like, "What else are you?" He goes, "I'm a cheater." I was like, "Okay, and what else?" And he was like, "I'm brave." And I was like, "Excellent, Caleb, what else?" And it was just getting him to start to identify things about himself. I mean, I don't think he's that brave, but you know,
as long as he thinks it, that's all that matters.
That is all that matters. And I will be champion. I'm like, "Come on, son, you're brave."
Got better response than we did with Levi.
Yeah. But moving on from what you said, Cherie, about Caleb being proud of what he is, I have to say, from our perspective, is one of the funny things is when I went to Janai's last parents' evening before this whole COVID thing, because they have one quite early on in the year, there was like posters on the wall about me and things that I am proud of. And on Janai's poster, something that I completely like blew my mind was what I love. She said, "I love my brown skin." Now, that literally touched my heart. I'm feeling emotional, but we'll blame it on the fact that I haven't had much sleep over the past 2 weeks. So if I cry, excuse me. But I can honestly say, that when I was, thank you. I can honestly say that when I was 6 years old, the last thing that I would say was, "I love my brown skin," because I did not. I wanted to be a different color. I wanted to be white, blonde haired and blue eyed because I was not the norm in primary school. And so that is something that I have really consciously, and I know Mike has tried consciously to try and instill in our children. So to know that my 6-year-old feels that way makes me feel so much better. So what about you guys? What have you all done to kind of encourage that Black pride in our children?
Sorry, go on. All right, so we had an issue with Caleb at his school when he came home. Well, see, it started off with, "I don't like my hair." So if you know, Caleb used to have his little locks.
Yes.
"I don't like my hair."
Cherie, listen, I've been holding this back. Your hair looks fire, man. I love the locks. Come on, red locks. Come on, Riri. Bad girl, Riri. Come on.
Thank you, Pastor.
Carry on, man. Carry on.
So we had an issue with Caleb. It started off with not liking his hair, and we thought, "Where's this coming from?" Because one, it would be, "I don't like my hair." Then it'd be, "I want my hair long like Daddy's." Then it started off to be.
Then he wanted to cut it. Like he was showing us pictures like saying, "I want hair like that again." We just couldn't really figure out what's this? Where's it come from?
And then he came home and says, "Oh, I want to be white. Can we not all be white? Can mommy be white, daddy be white?" And he like reeled it off, and it was was an ongoing thing where he just wanted to be white.
We struggled to get him to go to school some days. Like literally one of the days I took him to school and he sobbed and sobbed in the car. He started kicking the back of the chair when I was trying to take the seatbelt off. He didn't want to get out because it wasn't fair. And it absolutely broke my heart. More so because I was very fortunate. My parents sent me to Harper Bell, like Baka, which was a sacrifice for them as well, because obviously, you know, back then it was private education. And I can never repay them for just what that did for me as a person.
And we only realise that now, we're older, because back in the day, we were like, half about dead thing, but like now we're old.
That was an additional mortgage, to be fair. And, you know, it made us proud and confident in who we were. And during my primary years, I never once questioned why I was black or why my hair was a certain way, or, you know, I was quite into having, I was upset because I didn't have beads in my plaits, you know, because everyone else did and I didn't. I'm like, yo, where's the beads at? You know, I was excited to get my hair colored in a different style to go to school, and I was excited, you know, all my friends, I felt like I had such confidence because everybody else was like me.
And we studied Black history as well.
Yeah, so I knew where I was coming from. So to see that in Caleb just absolutely broke my heart, and it just made us have to really focus on teaching him about like differences in the world and people that are different, and God made us all special, we're all unique, and you know, mummy's not the same as daddy, because, and then he always says, oh, me, you and Isaac are the same and daddy's dark. That's an observation, but it's just it's forced us really to teach him at the time a 3-year-old, 4-year-old, about things that we really didn't think we'd have to teach him that early on.
The school were good as well in the sense of they started to show Black people empowerment, so showing them in work roles and in using books as well to say that, you know, there are people with your colour skin in life as well in general, and that helped a lot. So that's kind of how we kind of dealt with it.
They were very supportive,
really supportive.
Absolutely. I think God gave me girls, or God gave us girls to teach us these lessons. I really believe that, because I went to school. I mean, Marcus's schooling, he was raised in Liverpool, and the Black people are close to none, aren't they?
Oh,
really.
Yeah.
And then I went to a school where it was like spot the Black person in the class. So as I grew up, you know, I was around people who, you know, I love them, don't get me wrong, but you know, their hair was different to mine, and I didn't get to experience those things. You know, they'd run in, even little things like, you know, being in the playground and they're skipping and their hair's floating and my hair's not floating, you know. And it
stays up,
it floats one way.
And you know, I used to do this thing, like my cousin will vouch for me, because we both used to do it together. Like we'd sit there and we'd twist the front of our hair and we'd twist it and we'd see that it stretched all the way down here, and then we'd let go and it'd just go like this, and it was like, why does that happen? It's just not, you know. And then you see all on the telly, you never saw Black people and Black skin appreciated. And so I think as well, because my dad's side of the family is quite fair skinned, they're very fair, they're very light skinned, and like their hair as well, the quality of their hair and the length of their hair. My auntie's hair is down her back, and I'll be honest with you, I put on one of my auntie's hats one time when she came to my parents' house, because I remember it very clearly, and I put on her hat thinking, if I put this hat on and my hair's gonna be like auntie's hair and it's gonna be long on my back, like I really wanted to get that. And it's not until God gave me girls and he kind of taught me how to appreciate, because I had to appreciate it, because they needed to love themselves. So, you know, there was one time when I asked Sienna and I said, how do you feel about yourself? Like, tell me something that you like about yourself. And she couldn't think of anything.
That's sad.
I was like, what? I was like, you can't think of anything. You're beautiful, you're pretty, you're intelligent. She's so bright. Sienna is so bright. She catches things like this. Like I was telling her about her gorgeous hair. I was like, look at your hair. Nobody else's hair can do this. Look, you twist it and it boings back up, and you know, all the things that I didn't get Yeah, and it's not because my parents didn't teach me, but around me was just telling me something else.
Your environment.
Yeah, so now I work at a school which is mostly predominantly Black children there, and they are teaching the children, like, we make it our responsibility to teach the children, not just about, you know, loving everybody. Of course you must love everybody, because bottom line is we're all God's children.
That's
so
right.
You know, we must love everyone, but you've got to love yourself too.
Yeah.
And he made us all beautiful in our own way. And so, you know, when we're having celebrations at school, like, it's also a Christian school. So when we have celebrations at school, you know, we had Black Hair Day, and we were celebrating our hair. And you know, I went to school with like bubbles in my hair. I used all the Sienna and Savannah was like, "Mommy, where you going? Where you going with our bubbles?" But I loved it, like, and just seeing the children. We have so many books that have like reflect our culture. I don't even remember Handa's Surprise. I don't know if you guys did when you grew up, but Handa's Surprise was kind of like a new thing. And
never heard of that one.
Yeah, and that was kind of like the one book we had when I was young. My dad used to take me to the library just specifically. I remember walking up the road with him to take me, and we'd search through these books always to find Eat Up Gemma. There was a story called Eat Up Gemma, and it was only because that one and Amazing Grace were the only two Black stories that were in the whole library. When I say Black stories, I mean reflected Black children. I had grandma and nanny and our setup. You know what I mean? And now it's amazing to see just how many books there are, how much literature, how it's on the TV. You know, it's just nice to see that we have come to this point now. So I think it's a lot easier now than what our parents had to deal with.
I think we're so fortunate because we now live in a situation or an environment or a society where it's definitely more accommodating for Black people in general. When I grew up, I didn't remember seeing very many Black people on TV. I mean, you had Andy Peters and, you know, some of the other people. Like, he was like the token Black.
Ratings for Andy Peters.
Lenny Henry.
You had Lenny Henry.
Yes.
You had Ainsley Harriet. Yeah. You had what's the other Black guys? Mr. Motivator.
Yeah.
She's still going. June Sarpong, I don't know if she goes back them times. The Black girl that used to do.
Oh, yeah. Blue Peter and that.
Blue Peter, Sarpong, yeah. June Sarpong.
Brian Peters, June Sarpong. So we had a few people, but, you know, I kind of feel like our children are blessed because they live in a world, although there is systemic racism, they also live in a world which is a lot more accommodating for Black people. And, you know, I tell my children, for example, you spoke about them being beautiful, and we tell our children all the time that they're made in the image of God and they are beautiful. You know, if you see my kids, they all look different. You know, one of them's fair, one of them's medium, one of them's dark, and I want them to know that they all are beautiful. There's no
you're grading toast.
Pardon?
Sound like you're grading toast.
It's actually chocolate in our family.
It's actually chocolate, man. You got light chocolate, milk chocolate, caramel chocolate, dark chocolate. They're all sweet and they're all beautiful.
Amen.
The truth is, even amongst Black people, there's this whole thing about colorism.
Yeah.
And I kind of want to stamp that out with my kids and allow them to know that they're all special.
Yeah.
Yeah, same. I mean, we've had the same issue with Aliyah. I remember the day that she came home and again said the same thing. Like, she wanted to be white. She wanted to have straight yellow hair. And it's kind of trying to dig down to why that is. Again, it's the same because she's not seeing anybody else like her at school. And it was really hard. It was really hurtful as well because I was like, but mommy and daddy and Levi are all brown, you know, don't you want to look like your family? And she's like, well, no, like I want to be part of your family, but I don't want to look like that. Yeah. And again, I think it's been quite hard with us. We've been doing the same thing. So really kind of trying to affirm her every time I'm doing her hair. Look how beautiful your hair is. Look how beautiful you are. I go out of my way to buy books with Black characters in it, buy Black dolls, just whatever I can get with
the dolls
that look like her. Yeah. And I know we're saying it's great that we've come on and there's a lot more variety. The fact of the matter is you still kind of have to go out of your way to get it. Like you have to try and really search and find the specialized websites. So it'd be nice if they were a bit more mainstream. Like if you could go into Smith's and see it on the shelf, for example, I think that would help as well. But yeah, it can be really tough. I think the other thing that we discussed, probably, sorry to interrupt you, starting doing as well, is just talking a bit more about where we come from. I don't know how many of you guys feel kind of at home in England, but we want to kind of teach her a bit more about our heritage and where we come from. So I talked to her about, you know, our family's from Jamaica. This is where Jamaica is on the globe. And we look at things to do with Jamaica. This is the type of food we eat. Oh, guys, I didn't even tell you. Like 2 weeks ago, she decided she likes rice and peas. It's only taken 5 years, but I was so happy. And breadfruits, I was like, I'm winning this week.
We're always having to pick out the peas for her. It's like, what is it?
Come on now.
But you know, it's interesting that you talk. Well, it's interesting that we've been talking about the hair thing, because it kind of brings me back to an experience I had when I was younger. And I don't think it was direct racism, but it was kind of like we've been talking about, the systemic racism of people didn't really expect any different. And it was when I was at school. So I always used to have my hair cut short, as you find most black guys do, and well, used to. So not anymore.
Jonathan.
Andre.
Jonathan.
Swish
them locks, son. Swish them locks.
I'm like Samson.
Okay. I used to have it cut short, and I used to go to school. And it was a case of my year tutor one time came to me and said, your hair's too short. And I was kind of like, what do you mean? And they were like, no, your hair's too short. You've got to let it grow.
Like you had a buzz cut, was it?
Yeah, it was, buzz cut. Yeah, just short. No, it was short. It wasn't.
But that's what I'm saying. That's what how.
Yeah, but that's how that's how I guess they portrayed it, because it was kind of anyone with a yobbish kind of hairstyle, you know, your bad news type of thing. But it was kind of like, well, no. So I went home that day and I spoke to my dad about it. So then my dad was happy enough to then come to the school, and he said to me, you go back to school and you speak to the year tutor with respect. And we got to make sure that we emphasize that with our kids. You know, it's not about going in there bawling and shouting. It's still having the respect for whoever it is.
You challenge
respectfully, regardless of race. And just say, look, my hair is short because that is my culture. In my culture, I have my hair short. So the ruling in school was that you weren't allowed to, I don't know how many inches it was, but a lot of the boys were white boys, so you weren't allowed to have your hair any shorter than a certain length. Yeah. But obviously mine was very short. So I went back respectfully and explained, look, my hair is like this because this is how I've always had my hair for years. And it's part of my culture to have it short, to look decent, to look nice with it. And at the end of the day, he couldn't really argue. And in the end, it was kind of brushed off, and it was kind of a bit of an apology. Okay, you can keep your hair like that. But it's just those things that you grew up with, that it's either a lack of understanding of cultural differences, or because they've never seen it. There's all these different reasons that it could be. But then there's even those underlying ones, as you said, of the systemic racism altogether.
I don't think we're too far away from even that experience, because we've seen it in the news where children have been, you know, their parents have been asked to cut their locks off, or, you know, things like that. And I mean, I even read in, I can't remember which school, because we looked for a number of schools when we were choosing Caleb's nursery. And one of them, I remember just chuckling at it, in the uniform section, you know, because your hair's your uniform, it actually said, no woven in braids, no stuck to the head plaits.
Wow.
So they make cane rows.
Love it.
No woven in braids.
Weave at that age.
No, I think they just meant, I think
No,
they
black
actually
people?
meant cane rows.
No, I know.
I can't remember, it fails me, the third one, but it was something to do with like a boy's haircut, like it should, something to do with short back and sides was just not appropriate. And I kind of thought to myself, like, what are you expecting then? So it's protective styling for our black children to have their hair braided. Okay, I have nothing against saying no, you know, hair extensions. I'm quite all right with that. But to say that a child can't come to school with woven in braids or plaits stuck to their head in the uniform section, to me showed that actually in 2020 we're probably still where you were in Liverpool.
Yeah.
In the early 90s.
It's the same at my school as well. Like girls would get sent home for having braids or for having colours in their braids. The boys weren't allowed to have cane rows. It was the same at my school.
Well, I had a job not too long ago, when I was obviously just starting my locks.
Yeah.
And the manager was like, "Oh, you growing your hair?" I'm like, "Yeah, because I'm gonna put it in locks." "No, you're not." I goes, "What? Pardon?"
What?
Literally, nowhere to be like in front of those other people there. She said, "No, you're not." I goes, "Oh, I am." And then like, another lady piped up, and the other lady, like, I won't give a damn, but the other lady was like, "No, I think locks would look good on you," because she's obviously tried to just like
Yeah.
sort of smooth over the situation. But yeah, that was what, 2015. That wasn't even that long ago. So yeah,
Crazy.
There's definitely a lack of understanding when it comes to certain things culturally that we adopt. And I kind of feel like we have to be bold with what we do. My cousin was told that my cousin's got quite thick, like 4C hair. Her hair's kind of thick and coily. And she was told by her employer that she couldn't go to work with her hair out because her hair just looked too afro-y. You know, it wasn't corporate. In order for it to be corporate, it needed to be pressed. And so she would press her hair and straighten it all the time. So it was corporate. And I thought to myself, that's ridiculous. You know, if God wanted you to have straight hair, you would have been born with straight hair. But we should be able to adopt our culture and have our hair the way we want to.
I could see that hurt you on there.
It hurt me, big time hurt me, because I anyway.
So like, we always hear the term Black excellence, but what does Black excellence actually look like? I mean, you know, we've come from a long way to get to the 2020 Black people that are around us. But what to you guys is Black excellence?
I think for a lot of people, I don't want to speak on behalf of everybody. I think for a lot of people, when they think of the term Black excellence, they just think of Black people perhaps in places where they wouldn't have expected to be, or in places that would have been inaccessible for us just a few years ago. So like in boardrooms, being lawyers, dentists, whatever. Cabinet meeting, in government, you know, I think people generally think of that as Black excellence because, as I said, just a few short years ago, we wouldn't have been able to get there. And I think we've come further with each generation, like in terms of like the jobs, the careers that we have, where we're able to access. Like if I think about when my grandparents came over here, they couldn't do anything more than be a porter or a nurse in a hospital. Like they weren't allowed. Yeah. And each generation wants more for the next generation. So for like my parents, then it was like, well, you guys have to go to uni. And while my parents didn't quite get there, well, my dad went, but he wasn't able to finish. And so then for me, my generation was definitely, you're going to do this, you're going to get all A's, you're going to go to uni, you're going to achieve your dream of what you want to be. And each generation pushes the next generation, and they're kind of trying to open doors for us. So yeah, I think that's what I think it is.
Well, I think building on that, and we'll come on to it a bit later, but there's a stereotype, as we talked early on, where people almost expect us to fail. So I remember when I was doing some research into the topic and just looking at it, and I shared it with you guys, that most of the interest out there at the moment for people when they're curious and search on Google and things like that around Black families is always to do with what are Black families' socio-economic status? Why do Black families have no parents? Why do they have no father? Where's the mother? And it was all quite negative. And for me, Black excellence is showing that regardless of what race you are, when an individual looks at you, they see a role model. That for me is Black excellence. Regardless of color, when an individual looks at you, they see a role model. Someone that they can look up to, someone that they can trust, someone that they can resonate with. And for me, that's important.
Just to add to what you said about, sorry, I was just going to add to what Joe was saying about people expecting you to fail. That was definitely my experience throughout school. Although I never gave them reason to think that. I always performed well in my exams and things. But when I said I wanted to be a doctor, there was no one who was ever like, yeah, you can do that. It was more, okay, kind of what's your backup plan? And I remember like one of my exams, I had to ask to be put in for the higher paper because they wanted to put me in for the lower one. And then when my results came back and the teacher was handing out the results, he stopped at the girl next to me and he was like, why didn't you do better than Stacey? You should have done. There was no like, well done.
Wow.
Like, it was just,
Wow.
why didn't you do better? You should have done. And that was my experience throughout school. And it kind of goes back to the first point that we covered about how do you encourage your children to graft. You have to be the ones to push them, because often there's nobody else that will.
Yeah. There was one that's similar to that experience. You only just brought it back to my mind when you said it, actually. That's why it's good to talk. Because when I was doing my, I did health and social care, and this was in sixth form. And so it's done in strands. So the way how they did it, they kind of separated the group, and they said, right, well, this is the A and B strand. Yeah, A and B strand. And then we've got the C, D, and E strand. And so this is the level of work you need to do here. But however, if you want to get to that level, that's the level of work you need to do. And when they were distributing my work, they gave me, and they said, right, here's your work, the C to E strand. And I went, why can't I have the A and B strand? And I guess I was old enough to say that, I guess. So I was like, well, why can't I have the A and B strand? And she goes, no, because based on what you've done, you do, I think you'd be more comfortable with this one, more confident with this one. And that just drove me even more. And just to put it there, I did get that A for that strand because I pushed myself. You know what I mean? I worked for that because, like Stacey said, I felt like I had to prove myself.
Yeah.
We shouldn't have to be proving ourselves in the 21st century, but we're still having to prove ourselves.
And if you wanted to say,
sorry, go on.
I was gonna say, because I think like I'm intermittently seeing some of my friends tune in and out. I kind of feel like they might not understand why it's so important for us to have an episode on Black love, but that like epitomizes the reason why, because there is no expectation for a white person. If I'm being honest, I'm not making any racist comments. There is no expectation. You can be whatever you want. If you end up being a teacher, great. If you end up like working in a supermarket, great. If you end up being a doctor or a lawyer, okay. There were like stereotypes and expectations of certain races. For example, like the Chinese, you expect them to do really well. But with maths, IT, anything, you expect, that is an expectation of them. But with Black people, you don't expect anything of them. You don't like when you see them succeed, I said it earlier, you don't expect anything. So to me, Black excellence would just be for people to just accept the path that we are in and like be proud of the path that we're in, whatever, regardless of whatever the choices that we have to make. And going back to what happened with Stacey, like I had that a lot through primary school. I was pushed by my parents. Like I used to think it was too much, but so hard to work and prove myself. And one year of my primary school year, I remember I'd already like been at the top of my class, but there was this one teacher and I didn't realize it was racism at the time, but she used to ask questions and I put my hand up for every single question in a class I was the only Black person in the class. And she wouldn't acknowledge my presence. She'd just ignore me. So I'd have the answer and she'd just ignore me. And then one day we were talking about Caribbean islands and I was like, I know about Jamaica. I've been with my mum and dad 2 times. And she's like, Winnie, let me teach the lesson. Whereas if one of the other children said, I've been to Spain or whatever, they'd be like, how was your holiday in Spain? How was that? And it got to the stage where I went home crying every night and my dad had to go in and talk to that teacher. And I don't know what my dad said to her, but ever since he had that conversation with her, I felt like she actually acknowledged my presence. And my dad, that was probably the one time I actually had a conversation with my racism in the whole of my childhood. That's the only time I ever remember it. And my dad said, you know what, Winnie? Sometimes there are people who will just ignore you because of the color of your skin. And it isn't right, because we should love and accept every single person. But when it happens and they're gonna disadvantage the position that you're in, you have to call it out. You have to say that this is wrong. And even if they ignore you, you have to prove to them that it's a thing and believe within your heart that it is really there. And I think that's the struggle. That's why we feel there's such a need for us to strive for Black excellence, because it's a fight that we feel that we have to do every single day.
Absolutely. You know, I kind of feel like Black excellence for me is superseding the negative society's negative expectations. Yes, superseding society's negative expectations of us, for me, is an example of excellence. I mean, I can resonate with so many examples about racism And I think it's so bad, you know, when I hear Winnie's story about some of the things that she's been through and stuff, because lots of people go through racism and just, you know, ignore it like it's nothing. And I kind of feel like we do constantly have to work harder than ever. Otherwise, we won't be able to prove to people. So one of the things my dad always said to me is never get in trouble with the police. Never get in trouble with the teachers at school. You know, always strive to be the best you can. Get good qualifications. Because if you are successful, then no one can say anything negative about you. And that's what I try to tell my children, because it's a value that was instilled in me from my parents. And I really want my children to understand that they can achieve and do the best of their ability. And no one has to say anything negative if they live an exemplary life. That doesn't mean they have to be perfect. It just means they've got to do the best that they can possibly do.
And
me, as well, I think unfortunately, we're still seeing people being recognized as the first Black person to get to a certain place.
Yes.
That to me is wild. Like, I can't believe we're still having the first Black female, you know, fill in the gap, because this is happening way too often. And I just feel like, why are you the first one? And it's 2019. Like, why? But that's still happening. And just to echo what everyone said so far, it is just acknowledging and being proud and celebrating those people that are making this progress and getting to these positions where, okay, yeah, in my opinion, that it shouldn't be just now that they're the first Black, you know, fill in the gap. But the fact of the matter is, it's happening in a time where our children can look up and, like Jay said, see those role models and see that it's achievable, because it's representation matters. And they can see that, you know, yeah, that person looks like me.
That's true.
Mirroring what Cherie says, it was weird when I was at work, and another Black guy, he's older, been in the service for a while, pointed to another one and says, he's the first one. And I'm looking at him like, the first one what? He's like, oh, he's the first one of us. And I was like, what? So I'm actually seeing one of the first Black guys working at our hub, and I was like, what? Like in my lifetime. So I'm actually ranked as a number.
You're now a statistic, Jonathan.
It's
like,
bad. It's really mad. But like Black excellence for me is anyone who's achieving. I won't even say achieving. Anyone who's even just got a job or a vocation or doing anything. Someone that's absolutely doing the opposite of the narrative. So someone who's got drug dealing, and because we're all drug dealers, we've all smoked weed. So someone who's doing something different to the narrative that people see as Black people is someone I see who's achieving and Black excellence. So that goes down to that
breaking the barrier
from the bottom to the right to the top.
Yeah, and building on that, for me, Jonathan, that kind of leads on to I always remember my mum giving me a plaque, which is on the wall just behind there, actually, or on the shelf, which basically said a Bible text that said, whatever your hands find to do, do with all your might. And for me, that's part of that excellence, that, you know, there's the stereotype behind what we should do. Like you said, there's the us being looked down upon in places by some people. Now, don't get us wrong, we're not saying all white people are like that, but there are those that are the racists that have that mentality, not even openly sometimes. But the fact of the matter is, even if you do a job that isn't seen as, you know, the top three, the priority jobs, you know, the doctors, the lawyers, and so forth, whatever because of that graft we put in and is instilled in us, whatever we put our hands to, we become the best in that job. So, you know, it's always seen as, okay, we know that maybe a bin collector is not seen as a prestige job, but you know what? Be the best bin collector that's out there. Be the number one. Integrity, always on time, does a great job, thinks about what he's doing, takes care putting the bins back to the residents, all that sort of thing. Be the best at whatever you do. That's excellence.
And someone said that in the comments as well, and it's exactly that. Black excellence for me is to strive to be the top of what game you choose, which means working twice as hard, to often be seen as just as good, but doing it with style. And I think, you know, that's something that all of us are doing.
You know what though? Sorry, okay, may seem to come across controversial, but it's not trying to come across that way. So please try and hear what I'm saying. I don't know where to find the balance as in raising your children, because I don't want to have to teach my girls that this is what you have to live with, and then they have a chip on their shoulder constantly thinking that every other person that's not black is going to try and tear them down. And so I think finding that balance, trying to find where I don't know if it's something that like, how do we go about that? I don't know. I'm just asking because look, we're all in it together, trying to raise our children to be aware and to help one another. How do we find that balance?
Well, it's an interesting point, because when, say, for instance, everyone's talking about what they went through at school, my experience at school was really, really different. So I went to a predominantly white school. There were probably like 3 black people in my whole year. And the reality is, I knew that my skin color was different to other people's, but I didn't actually see myself as different. I was just a kid. I was just a boy. I wasn't thinking of myself as a black boy. And in fairness to everybody at that school, I was never made to feel separate. Like I'd noticed little things. For instance, you know, maybe I was just an ugly child, but you play kiss chase and all the black boys will be left to the side and ignored. So you're running around and no one's chasing you. You're like, okay, you know, those things. I have to give you credit. Like
that's the game I never played.
Didn't you go to like a boarding school with all boys though?
Yo, big man.
Hey, Jonathan, why is my man giving shade for?
I can talk to my man separately off camera still.
There you go. My man would have lasted 5 minutes.
This is it, right? So I never was made to feel like I was anything different. My parents never were saying, oh, you know, white people did this versus black people. And so it's only later on in life, I started to question, going, did I grow up without a culture? Because everybody had these experiences, everyone had a strong identity. And I actually was identifying as British. I didn't see myself as anything different. But you start to clock certain things, right? Like barely any of my parents' families use their God-given name. They all use their middle name, which is more acceptable.
Oh,
so it's like, yeah, well, think about it, right? Like none of them would use their first name. And it's only after a while did I realize that my dad's name isn't actually my name.
Don't start on the names, Dre.
But no, I'm not going to mention what his name is, but this is the thing. It's like everyone said, like, my dad would have a name to call him, and then someone would call him by a different name, and my dad would try to slap them. And I'm like, why are you acting this way?
Why does it happen? I don't understand it. My auntie's the same thing. Why? I don't know why everybody's called a different name.
Jamaican thing, man. They all have an alien.
But if you think about it, we all have a way of fitting in. So like I had an uncle who would go by a different name because it was more acceptable in the friendship circle. And so, you know, all these different things. And so I've got names which can pass for different cultures. I don't know whether it was a conscious decision or unconscious decision by my parents, but must have been like 15 when I realized that I've got my dad's name, but the name that they gave me as a middle name was not actually my dad's name. That was a fake name he came up with. you know? And they're going like, what are you doing? But these are the things which, when you start to understand, like, why is it that we're changing our name? Why is it that, like, for instance, my dad gave me elocution lessons or had me have elocution lessons at school. Simple things he told me was, firstly, I had a really bad list. And secondly, you'll never get a job speaking like that. These things from a child, you don't really understand, but they actually work. Like, how many times have you heard, that person's been discriminated against because they see the CV or whatever? So you see a CV with a foreign name on, and people's first question is, are they going to be able to speak English?
Yeah.
Why is that even a thought?
But that was definitely in my mind when we were naming our kids. I was like, I want them to have a nice name that I like, and that's a little bit kind of edgy, but I don't want it to be too edgy that they don't get a job, like the CV gets thrown out straight away. And I think that kind of comes back to stereotypes as well. We know that certain names are being associated with certain personas. and particularly there's a lot of stereotypes about Black people. So I know Dre mentioned some about, if you Google us, Black families, they're looking at kind of our socio-economic status and rates of divorce and why aren't the Black fathers around? Why are they all single parent families? There's stereotypes about the males that, you know, they're aggressive or hypersexualized, and the women are just angry and loud. So, I mean, have those stereotypes affected you guys in any way, and kind of how can we deal with those in a positive way?
I think it's been really hard growing up, because there were times that I really felt frustrated because I felt judged by the way that I dressed. So guys, I'm sure you can remember the whole hip hop era, baggy jeans, you know, tin boots, that kind of thing. To be honest, that was actually my favorite era for fashion. I loved baggy jeans and stuff like that.
Because that wasn't fashion.
Pardon?
Guys,
your whole waist into the leg of your trouser leg because it's so baggy.
Baggy jeans, Timberlands, and a puffer jacket.
Because he's petite, don't worry about it.
Brethren, I don't know what you're on a different page, son. That was the style, bro. You wore baggy clothes. Like now, like you could never get away with skinny jeans. If you wore skinny jeans,
you get sent for every time. Get sent for if you tried to.
100% look like you're wearing leggings. It's not allowed.
Yeah, you couldn't get away with that then, exactly. But it's funny because as I said to you earlier, Jonathan, I remember going into a bank, and it was a private bank, and I went in there just asking for directions, and I was dressed in baggy jeans, tin boots, a puffer jacket, and a beanie hat. And I went in, and the lady was reaching under the counter, and when she heard me speak, I think she was surprised at the sound of my voice. She expected me to sound rough. And she said to me, "Oh, I was really panicking when you came into the bank. I thought you came to rob the place, and I was reaching for the panic button." So I laughed. You know, I thought she was joking, didn't take it seriously. She said, "No, seriously. You know, I literally thought you were going to rob the place because we know all of the customers. It's a private bank, and we've never seen you come in before, and we literally thought you were going to rob the place." And I remember walking out, and I spoke to my dad about this, and he was like, "No, that's racist. You could have called the police. That is racism." And I kind of feel like there are certain stereotypes associated with negativity that makes us feel that we can't dress or express ourselves in a certain way lest we are judged. So like you have dreadlocks, people think you might sell weed or something. You know, you wear baggy clothes, people think you're a gangster. You know, you like hip hop music, or you drive your car with your seat too low, you're a thug, you sell drugs. And I kind of feel like I've experienced so many examples, which I'm sure many of you have, of those negative stereotypes that have frustrated me to the extent that I've said to myself, I really want to rise above this and educate people so that they know that when they see a Black guy who may walk with a swagger, who may like certain music, who may drive their car low.
Hallelujah.
But this is to the man then, right? So what you're saying, Micah, I do this all the time, and I want to know if any of you guys do it. When you're walking down the road and you come up behind a woman, I always cross over because I know standardly, Black man walking up behind a woman. You seen is it Central Park 5?
Yeah.
I'm not looking to be on the 6 o'clock news for no apparent reason. And the thing is, I thought I'm just being a gentleman because I don't want them to feel uncomfortable because I know what the presence of a Black man behind someone can. So I'm just going to cross over so that there is no doubt in their mind, there's no panic, there's nothing. They can't call the police for nothing on me. And when you think about it, I'm interested, like, have any of you ever done something similar or felt you've had to act a certain way to avoid the stereotype?
I can think of two situations. So the first one was when we first moved into our area. Now, our area, we don't really, I think we're the only Black people, the Black family in around like close proximity. But
that's what happens when you live in a posh area.
I have to give God the glory because all of our neighbors are all like white around us. But I tell you, there are adopted families, so praise the Lord, they're awesome. We've got great neighbors. But one of the neighbors, when we first came here, he came over and like, we did the whole, hi, we are the Ray family. And, you know, he did all that. And he was like, oh, because no, he went, oh, but you're quiet.
Wow.
So I was like, well, what are you expecting? Like, you waiting for me to blast the music out loud and disturb the neighborhood and carry on.
Come like a yardie.
Yardie.
Andre.
When it comes to situations like this, I don't know. I'm not a hot-tempered person, but I'm very I like to voice my concerns sometimes, or I like to, you know. So there was one time, again, we went to Tesco Express, and it's in this area, and there was a security guard that was standing by the door, and I just walked in. I had my head tie on and whatever, not expecting to see nobody. So went in, and instantly the security guard started to do all this.
Oh yeah.
Even like that giraffe neck where they're looking around.
So I picked up my phone and I phoned Marcus, and I was like, "Hi, Marcus, I don't know why this security guard is watching me."
Wow.
Made a scene, you know.
Like, I don't have any money and I don't work for the things that I'm trying to buy. But I have no idea. And that was my way of coping with it. I don't know whether it was the right way, but that's how I had to deal with that situation at that time. You know, that's just a few. There's so many things we could say.
But it's like you said, Jay. I think I've had situations and circumstances like you said, walking behind someone, and I think you kind of just think, well, when you walk too close to anyone in general, yes, you might feel away, but there's always the thought process, especially with older people. I find, like the elderly and that sort of thing. They never talk to you, they never say anything to you. And you have to go out of your way to say hi and give them a smile, and then they think, oh, okay.
I love it. I do it all the time.
Yeah. And I think it was amazing. One time I was walking in Solihull. It was actually. So I was walking in Solihull.
Solihull, darling.
Solihull.
That's how they tell you you're not from there. Solihull.
I was walking down the road in this place, and out of the blue, I seen an old lady walking towards me. No, I lie. I was walking past her. So she was with her trolley, and I was walking past her. And then I kind of had to kind of take twice, because she said, "Oh, excuse me." And I kind of thought, did someone say excuse me? But then I thought, oh no, maybe she didn't. But then she said excuse me again. And I was kind of in shock, because I was thinking the typical response from any older person like that is to either look over their shoulder, like you said, or just look carefully, or stop, or try and walk a bit faster. But this lady actually stopped me and asked me to help her to take her bags to her apartment. So she's in one of those nursing, not nursing homes, what are they called? You know, those villages, that's it, the villages. So she asked me to walk her, so crossed over the road, and it wasn't far, but it was a good distance to take her bag, because it was too heavy for her, to take her inside the village so that she could get in the lift, and then she'd go to her house. And I was just kind of taken back by that, because I was thinking, well, wait a sec, this doesn't usually happen. The opposite always happens. And it just shows that there's people out there who don't think like that. And we're so scarred by the people who always think like that.
It's a good point, you know.
Exactly. And I think that's what's important, that we don't miss, and we're not trying to purposely not highlight that, because we've all had really positive experiences. You know what I mean? And that's not what this is about. We're not trying to highlight just the negative. These are the stereotypes that, unfortunately, you know, either ourselves or someone close to us has experienced, and it's kind of molded the way we behave almost. So kind of following on from Stacey's question, like, how do we go about teaching our children about these stereotypes and this expectation or this stigma that's attached to them, as innocent as they are, and like, how do we go about teaching them to not be that way, or to at least identify with them so they can, you know, have an understanding?
I think it's important for them, like we're going back to the beginning where we say understanding where they come from. Now, Black people have been painted throughout history as aggressive, as scary, especially men, scary, big, don't know how to control their tempers. So that's what we're painted as. And so when you do go behind that old lady, unfortunately, as far as she knows, we're all aggressive and we're all going to do bad, negative things to everyone we come across. So it's good to, I think it's something to highlight and explain that to our children, where that's come from, where the ideas come from, understanding simple things like colonization, imperialism, go back, right back to history, not just talking about slavery because I'm kind of bored of talking about that, but, you know, understanding how progressively we've become almost like dirt to some people. And then again, reiterating everything we've spoken about, and then elevating them,
just building them more,
constantly building them more. But they have to understand where it started for them to be able to understand the climb that they're going to have to do.
And I think it also goes back to a question that Dion asked about 15 minutes ago about how do you get the balance right? Because it's not something that I talk to my children about every single day, but I take examples like what has happened in the past 2 weeks to actually have a conversation with them, because of the journey that I've traveled, I have to say that race isn't something that I've had to discuss with my children. And my children are kind of like how you grew up now, Dre. They don't naturally see themselves as different from their peers, because I guess we've sheltered them in a way. We've lived the experience. We've Googled the right place to live where they won't be aware of their own color. We've Googled the school and been to the school to make sure that they won't be made to feel that they're different from their peers. So they live life just thinking, I'm a British person. It doesn't matter what color my skin is. But then when there are moments like what has happened in the media, and the 2 weeks is the first time I talked to them about being the only Black person in my primary school, in my secondary school, and the impact it had on me. And they were like, but why, Mummy? Why would that make a difference? But then that's when you teach them, you know, but then why would people say that way? I was like, because it doesn't happen all the time. And they're like, yeah, of course, because it doesn't happen with me. My teachers and my friends all treat me the same. The people on the street don't look at me any different. But yes, there may be a time when people will look at you in a certain way. So when you're in a confrontation, don't do this, don't do that. Or, you know, when you work a job, don't do things that make them think that you're a bad person, because you can't live to a stereotype. Well, I don't stereotype. I don't think they know what that is yet. But you know what I mean? Like when you have those moments, that's when you teach them.
Yeah. And it's important to kind of teach them and educate them now while they're young, rather than waiting for a negative scenario to happen and they're caught off guard. So, you know, many of us have been through racism and experienced varying degrees of racism. And sometimes I've laughed it off. I'll be honest, I've laughed it off and been dismissive because I've thought, it's just their ignorance. And then it's after, when you reflect, that you think to yourself, oh man, they actually didn't call me the N-word, but they think I'm less than they are. And so for us, it's about making sure our children understand that they are of value now, and understand and recognize the signs and the red flags and what to do if someone does racially attack them.
But that leads on nicely to what I was just going to ask now, because, you know, what is the role of like a Black man or a Black father in all of this? Like, what ways could people that are watching who may be going through this, or, you know, ourselves as we're raising our children, what kind of things could we do or say, or even just do, just to empower like wives, our mothers, daughters, grandmothers, sisters, aunties, you know, the females around us, because many a time we get forgotten in the background. You know, we stand strong next to our Black man and we're supporting him 100%. But then how can you guys do the same for us?
First things first is be present. We've all heard the stereotype, Black men are never present. And I think one of the things that I've learned from marriage is I'm not perfect, and marriage has shown me how much I don't know. And I think as a man, whether Black or any other race, it's important to understand where your strengths are and where your weaknesses are, and to work with that strong woman in your life to be able to, I say, support where you're less strong. So for me, I make sure that I respond to Stacey in the way that I would want Aliyah or Soraya to always want a man to respond to them. I will always teach Levi to be respectful to women. So it doesn't matter that Aliyah's older than Levi, he will always be the protector. No matter whether you're in a bad mood with your sister, when it goes down, you're there. Like my dad raised me that whenever, so I would sleep on the bottom floor, my bedroom was there. I would always have to walk on the side of the pavement next to the road. I would always have to sleep by the front door. I would always have to have the side of the bed by the door. So anything happens, you are between the most precious thing in your life and harm's way.
Yeah.
And I think that's what's important. As a strong Black male, you have to look at the people in your life and go, this is my territory. Nothing will hinder it, harm it, or come near it that's going to be detrimental towards them. You almost revere your family more than yourself.
Mm.
That's for me what's important.
Yes, I love that. I love that.
Me too.
Can I
That's
add
nice.
to that?
Oh, go on.
No, go.
I was just going to say along those lines as well, if you're talking about things that Black males can do, I think really affirming the Black women in their lives, because it's quite tough in the West when you're just, you know that you are not the standard of beauty.
Yeah.
I don't know what it's like for you guys at all, but I know for myself, my other Black girlfriends, like no one gave us a second look. Even the Black boys, they would refuse to go out with us. We were not the standard of beauty. Our hair wasn't straight. It wasn't like
the Black team still.
We didn't look like this.
My biggest fan. Cool.
But you went to a different school, so it might have been different. But like for the rest of us, we were constantly sidelined, constantly ignored. And so to not even have our kind of Black brothers speak up for us in public, in all other areas of life was really, really hurtful. So I think just being mindful of that, and just thinking, but this could be your sister, it could be your auntie, it could be your mother, it could be your cousin, and just keeping that in mind and trying to really positively affirm us both at home and in the public domain as well.
Yeah. I'd add to that as well, being affectionate. Because just like what Dre's saying, like I echo that 100% in my life, but it's almost natural for a man to be that affirmative, to be that strong person. But sometimes it's hard for Black guys, and you see, to be affectionate. Like I've struggled to hug my dad now. Sometimes I see my dad, I haven't seen him for a long time, and I go to hug, and it's kind of like all right, Dad, yeah, we'll hug. Do you get me? It's one of them. There's kind of a little like, because it's like a little pause, because it's like, man, never it. Do you know what I mean? Like, I think it's nice to be affectionate, so I will kiss and I will cuddle Caleb and Isaac. Me and Sheree were talking about it. Like, we want them to see us being affectionate to each other, being protective to each other, not just me to Sheree, but Sheree for me as well. And I think that's really, really important, especially for boys, having two boys as well. You've got to show them that it's not just about being the macho strongman, but also being that loving and affectionate one as well.
That's right. And
I think that's super important as well, Jonathan, because I think that's the stereotype that is portrayed, that the man is supposed to be the man. And yes, you might love your wife, and you might love your children, but I show my love by buying you this and doing this for the household and going to work every day. That's not how it should be. We have to show that real affectionate love. Like you said as well, Dre, it's showing my two daughters that I love their mum. This is the one that brought my two beautiful children into the world. And the way that I take care of her, look after her, is exactly like you said, Dre, how you want them to grow up and look for a partner, or a man should be treating them in the same way. And at the same time, it's also them seeing that, yes, even when we have arguments, we might have that argument, but also letting them see how we kiss and make up after, how we resolve that argument, how we talk it out, and seeing that affection with them being there, not just them seeing the argument and then we make up later on where they don't see it, because all they're seeing then is the argument.
Good point.
You're gonna go there, How are we just going, guys?
My G, come on.
Michael, what is wrong with you?
Oh, swing.
3 on the way.
Relax.
Oh, Michael, you're swinging, man.
You're swinging.
I don't mind kissing and making up.
And it's important for them to see that, because that is good. That's precious.
Yeah, and I think one of the important things is never be afraid to apologize. Like that's a big thing, and it's so understated, but never be afraid. And I've heard a lot of parents say, I never apologize to my kids. I will, because for me personally, and I'm not saying if people decide not to, that's wrong, but for me personally,
it is wrong.
I think a child needs to understand that parents make mistakes.
Yeah.
That's right.
And when they make mistakes, they are big enough to apologize, because then it teaches them a life lesson that when they make mistakes, they can
Yes.
apologize.
Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. So guys, we've come to the end of our program today, and I hope you've all enjoyed it. I've thoroughly enjoyed this discussion, and I think there's been so much food for thought. One thing I want to say to encourage everybody out there that's in love, that's happy, is try your best to emulate your relationship on the character of Christ. Do your best to instill words of affirmation, show love, show acts of service, give gifts, show your partner how valuable they are to you, because they truly are special. And remember that you are made in the image of God, and black surely is beautiful.
Okay, thank you so much. Thanks to everybody who's got involved as well. I can't believe the time has flown by so quickly. I know we ran over time, and I think it was something that it was a choice that we had to make, because I think it's important. What we're discussing is important. And do we go for a viewer's question? Do we normally do one viewer's question? Do we have time? Can we rush it quickly?
Can I someone asked a question. I don't know if we're all right to discuss it. It was what was our first racist experience? But I don't know if racial experience. I don't know if we want to do it.
If you're comfortable.
If you're comfortable, I don't know if we.
I think I've spoken about mine already. Like
Mine as well.
Yeah, I think
we get to time by the way, guys, and I disappear. Carry on. Everybody, I've got to go to work. So if we finish after 9:30, that's why.
Superwoman.
Now I think very quickly then, one of my first experiences was I remember it so well actually. I was at a swimming pool and just swimming, and a little white kid came up to me and was like, stay away, and obviously because I was really young at the time, I kind of knew what it was, but at the same time it still got me upset. And I think, like we've already spoke about, that's why we have to teach our children about their background, about unfortunately about racism in some way, keeping it not too graphic for them at that age, but just to show them that there are people that are uneducated out there. So for a white child to have that mentality, especially in a negative way, means that it must be being portrayed through the parents in some way.
That's right.
It's what I thought. So, there's uneducated people out there, and it's difficult when you're small, but that's the first instance that I remember.
My first instance was in primary school, being called the N-word and getting told to go back to where I came from. So that's
my word.
Wow.
That's my first experience. I remember. It's like I remember it quite vaguely because I feel like I pushed it so far back that I remember I was with my dad somewhere. We heard monkey chants, and I said to my dad, "Why are they doing that?" I was that young. I didn't understand. Naive, didn't have a clue. I remember my dad's words, and it's kind of what I've taken with me. And he goes, "Don't worry, son. Them is more monkey than you." And he laughed. And carried on walking. Yeah. And and see how we all laugh. That's kind of how we've taken. That's how I take racism now. So
how else can you take it? Yeah.
I hear the monkey chants. I hear go back home on your banana boat when I was working on the doors and food being thrown at me and all sorts. And it's like I laughed at it, and that was kind of my way of dealing with it. It's obviously when you think about it now, it's quite sad that those things happen and you laugh about it, but it's kind of almost that's how you have to deal with it, because otherwise you just become the aggressor.
And you become a stereotype.
And there was excellent video quickly that I saw today that kind of reminded me of that. There was 2 boys being chased by Coventry City fans.
Yes,
I saw this.
Yeah. And automatically what the police did, they went there and put one of the black boys in handcuffs, even though there was 50 to 60 people after these guys, throwing them, attacking them, being racially abusive, and the police automatically went for the black boy and put him in handcuffs straight away.
They said they had a knife.
They had a knife, yeah.
But still, it's still like.
No, but when they searched and they found they had nothing, so they made up.
Yeah. So it's kind of like that's you get the gist, but it is quite sad that unfortunately, that's obviously how we have to deal with it.
It's quite bad. I don't remember my first racist experience, but I remember one that sticks out in my mind the most is I was on crutches. I mentioned this to you as well, Jonathan. I was on crutches, and I was on my way to Bristol to stay with my uncle on a Friday night because I was preaching on the Sabbath. And at the time, I think I was about 20, and 7 police officers came and surrounded me, and they were armed. Now, it's quite rare to find armed police officers in the UK, unless they're like special forces. Anyway, they were armed police officers. 7 of them surrounded me, and they asked me about a crime and said that I fit the description of a guy who had robbed somebody and beaten them up. And I said, what did the description?
On crutches.
Yeah, I was on crutches. So I said to the police officer, what did the guy look like? And they said, well, the description of the guy is he had dreadlocks and was 6'2". And so I laughed and said, I don't think I could have shaved my hair that fast, and I'm not 6'2". And they took my details. They gave me a hard time. They were very rude to me. They took my details, home address, telephone number, my uncle's details, and I left. And I remember calling my mum about this because I was really kind of shaken up. And she was just like, just be very careful and just go to your uncle's house and just stay there and just pray that God will protect you. And I mean, that for me was one that stood out. And I think, yeah, we just live in a society where this is just happening. It's just prevalent. And lots of people have worse stories than that.
See, mine is a little different in that my first experience I remember anyway of racism was actually by a bunch of black kids. It was the weirdest thing. I remember being at school and the first one came up to me and like, are you a coolie? Now, at the time, I didn't know what that was. I'd never heard of that terminology before. And so I'm just like, no. And then I walked off. And then they come back to me. Yeah, you are. Yeah, you are. I was like, what do you mean? And so what I found out is it was difficult for me because, so my family, so to West Indian, there's a high propensity of Indian in my family. And it all landed on me. And so it's a case of where black people didn't really accept me as one of them, and white people didn't accept me. And so I was kind of like outcast. And that was the first time I was ever made to feel different. And it was the weirdest setup because when they questioned me, I had no idea what this term was, but it stuck with me all through life.
But
I got no locks, but I'm one of you.
You're black. Well, you're black. You're my brother.
I know it's a bit of a plug, but if anyone kind of wants to understand the whole systemic racism thing, I don't know if anyone watched the Sitting in Limbo program that was on the other day. Definitely go and watch that and just see the reality of the situation and what goes on or what has gone on, especially with the Windrush generation.
Yeah. Well, guys, looks like we've come to the end of another show. This has been one that's been, I say, very relevant with what's happening, but I also think it's enlightening for people who are black and those who aren't, just to understand a little bit about, I say, our culture, and also just to be able to have these open dialogues, because this is what's important, is being able to have those open conversations. So appreciate you guys tuning in. If you can just have a closing prayer, so we can bow our heads. Father in heaven, I thank you for just this platform to be able to have this discussion, people being able to share their experiences. We're not here to preach. We're not here to tell people what's right or wrong. We're just here to be able to give an insight into what we've been through. And if people find that relevant to their lives, I ask that you help to provide that support to them, their friends, their colleagues, their family, even if they want to reach out to us, that they do so, because everyone to some degree has experienced this. So I pray that you give people an outlet to be able to share, but also to be able to take from this ways in which they can empower the next generation to be accepting of others and to also strive for that excellence and that greatness and that acceptance of each other. So I thank you for the friendship here today, and I ask that you keep us all safe in this coming week. In Jesus' name I pray, amen.
Amen.
Guys, like we have these sessions every single week. If any of you have enjoyed this content, please continue to share it, to like it, comment, bring your friends, and you can follow us on all of our social profiles. We've all got our individual profiles on the promos. We've got Can We Just Talk 20 on Facebook and on Instagram, or even jump across to YouTube and subscribe. It'd just be Can We Just Talk. So guys, once again, thanks for joining us and catch you next week.
Bye. Bye.